William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I welcome you to another Two Hats special of community events. Let's look in and see what's really happening.
Good afternoon and welcome to Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet and I'm here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. The very late Lerone Landis will be back with us next week. He had teeth done this week, the other day on Friday, so he couldn't talk. And radio doesn't work if you can't talk.
Yeah. Feel better, Lerone. For our listeners, a piece of equipment
just fell off in my hand. Okay, well, I'll hold this.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's going to be today.
Pledge drive starts next week, so
we can't have nice things.
We need a new. It's the microphone's fine. It's just the thing that screws into the arm. Our guests today are the McSprinkles, Katie and Leslie. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're getting married in a month and a half.
We are 7 weeks from yesterday.
Yeah.
Woo! But who's counting?
Well, who's counting? Yeah.
She is.
Apparently.
Yes.
The one who has to decorate.
All your plans made?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Do you have your cake baker?
Actually, last night we went to Maggiano's, and you're eating there?
Mm-hmm.
You ever had
Sure.
that chocolate zuccotta cake?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, oh my God, it's like 5 layers or something. So we get done with dinner last night, and she goes, hey, you want to go to Maggiano's and get a piece of cake? It's like, yeah, because I love that stuff. I got a piece for my birthday. So we go down there. She buys a whole cake. The whole cake is sitting in her refrigerator.
Can we count?
Minus a couple of pieces. Oh, hell yeah. Sure. Come on over. We had a couple of pieces last night, but yeah, so.
Is that what you're going to do for cake?
That's part of it, but the rest of it is a highly guarded secret, but yeah.
Do you have flowers? You had a florist that wasn't homophobic?
Well, down in Oak Lawn, I've been able to find a couple that aren't.
Yeah.
You know, who would have thought?
I know.
Who would have thought? And what else? Oh, photographer.
Yeah, I'm thinking about trying to maybe push a few buttons that go and get estimates from cake bakers up where we live and some florists up where we live just to see if they'll tell us no.
Well, you know, the thing is transgender flowers and transgender cakes are, they're questionable. So
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, apparently they constitute terrorist acts.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and they're trans and lesbian. So,
Yeah.
what do you do with that?
Double
Here's the
win.
bouquet. That's that one.
Or just
Hold it up to the mic so people at home can see.
Yeah.
Here was my experience in planning the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that we did not in our own community was looking for rings. And there was a store that was going out of business. It was north of LBJ, and we went in and we went up to the counter and we said, we'd like to see that tray right there. They took it out, and the woman behind the counter said, oh, when are you getting married? And we said, June 9th, and we started talking a little bit. Most people, if you're coming in to buy something, they're happy to make the sale, and they're happy for you that you're getting married. Because most people are like that.
Yeah.
when we went to get our rings, we picked something that was from a jeweler that was no longer going to be sold.
Mm-hmm.
So it was going to be out of print, so to speak. And we had to get one way up in Frisco and one over at North Park. And in both places when we went, it was a friendly little gay man who helped us.
No problem there.
And they were ecstatic for us. So
Yeah.
that was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think, for most people, I think, if you're going, wedding ring, wedding cake, flowers, that kind of stuff, shopping, it's one of the happiest times in your life. Why would you want to be such a buzzkill? I mean, do some business, make a profit, and share in their
Plus,
joy.
if you're a baker, you like making cakes. If you're a florist, you like putting together bouquets.
Yeah.
Right, that's why you do those jobs.
This person who sold rings and other jewelry, she enjoyed selling rings to people because it made them happy.
Yeah.
You could tell that she just enjoyed doing that.
So, yeah, so far, no problems.
Well,
We'll
there
keep you
shouldn't
posted.
be.
No.
Right.
You're
when-
the one buying the service. I mean,
when Maggiano's gave you that cake and you had a piece for your birthday, were they participating in your birthday? Did they know that they were participating in your birthday?
Yeah, they did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I booked the reservation, and it asks online, when you book it online, is there a special occasion?
And they put a candle in it and everything.
And then when we got there, the waiter, one of the first things he asked was, are we celebrating anything tonight? And I was like, yep, her birthday. I was hoping they'd come sing, but they didn't.
But they did ask us several times if we had any food allergies as well, so they wanted to make sure of that. But yeah, they were participating a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
So I guess they were condoning it.
they were condoning that you were born.
Yeah, how about that?
Your transgender birthday, not your...
Oh, did you just out me?
I don't think... What did I say? I think I left your card in the green room.
Yeah.
Transgender's on your new card.
Oh.
What is her... What's her...
Transgender Education and Advocacy Coordinator.
For
so
Resource
happy
Center.
birthday and happy new title.
Thank you.
That's exciting, Leslie.
It is.
It's a fantastic title. It's the best title next to Emperor, which of course I am. He can't spell the word Emperor, but he wants to be that. It's fantastic.
You can't spell United States. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
For the United States.
Well, it's confusing with two T's in a word.
Like Twitter.
That is three.
Yeah. Not the way he spells it.
Oh, okay. So this week, Trump withdrew LGBT employee workplace. He didn't withdraw the protections. He withdrew a
Interpretation.
an amicus brief, I guess it was.
It was, of course, under Obama, they filed more
falling apart.
problems. My microphone stand just collapsed.
Yeah, well, my microphone came off in my hands.
So, but the Obama administration would file briefs in support of LGBT protections for pending court cases. And Trump has systematically gone through and of course his, not so racist Attorney General Sessions, they've been one by one pulling all of those, and they pulled another one this week.
Well, Katie, you're an attorney, and you may or
me.
I did out you as. Okay, Katie, you're a transgender attorney, so I'd like your transgender opinion on this. And you might know this or might not. When somebody files an amicus brief from the Justice Department, and then the next administration withdraws it, is it actually withdrawn, or is it just this administration that isn't signing on to it?
It doesn't change the law.
No, it's not a matter of changing the law. It's a matter of, is the Obama amicus brief gone, or is
it depends on if it's a true amicus brief, which amicus means it's a friend of the court. So you're coming to the court and say, hey, we don't have a formal interest. We're not a party to this lawsuit, but we believe that the court should be aware of this. So as a friend of the court, we want the court to know these things. So if it's in a situation, a case where the United States is not a party to it and it's just an amicus brief, if they withdraw it, then technically the court's not going to consider it. Now, in cases where the U.S. government, and there have been several cases where the U.S. government was an actual party, when they change their position, then it's a more of a formal change, and it's recognized that now the current administration is no longer going to support that, and that could be a death nail to the case itself if they're a party. If they're just an amicus brief, it's just one less amicus brief because the ACLU is still going to file one, Transgender Law Center is still going to file one, but if the U.S. government files one and then they withdraw it, it's just one less for them. So it's less an issue if they just withdraw an amicus brief. It's a huge issue if they're an actual party and they're now saying, hey, we're not going to defend this position, because who's going to defend it?
And do you know what this lawsuit was exactly?
I don't. I just saw the news blurb that showed that another brief was withdrawn from a court case dealing with LGBT rights.
And what this has to do with is Title IX or Title VII, which under the
Title
Obama
VII.
administration, sexual orientation and gender identity were considered part of sex.
Correct.
And Title IX, Title VII, those are things that relate to non-discrimination based on sex.
Right.
So, and some of these cases, like Ken Upton from Lambda Legal was here a few weeks ago, and he was explaining if a man is particularly effeminate and he's fired because he is acting effeminate at work and it's seen as not the standard, well, then he was fired because of sex.
Yeah, that's under Price Waterhouse.
Yeah. That was the whole lineage that came from Price Waterhouse, which was people were either being fired or they were not being promoted, which is what Price Waterhouse was more about.
And then he had just filed a lawsuit about somebody who isn't flamboyant, who doesn't present as gay. When his supervisor found out that he was gay, that's when he got fired. And this was at Xerox, I guess. The case was at Xerox. But his supervisor fired him for being gay. Does that come under sex discrimination when it wasn't apparent to anybody that this person was gay?
Potentially it could if...
Well, the Obama administration said it was, and that might be the case, actually, that this was related to. No, it couldn't be, because it's a recent case.
With the language in Price Waterhouse, which was later used in Macy versus ATF, which deals specifically with transgender people, but what the language says is that when any person deviates from a sexual stereotype, and then they are punished for that deviation, that falls under sex discrimination. So if a man loves another man, he is now deviating from the sex stereotype of a man being with a woman. So therefore it is sex discrimination in that he is being punished because he's not fitting the quote-unquote traditional definition of being a man.
We're talking about gender norms and gender roles. The traditional
and so
gender roles.
But what
if you're
that
fired
lawsuit...
because you're a lesbian, you are deviating from the gender norm considered for a woman, and therefore that's sex discrimination. That's sort of how that lineage plays out.
And two, I mean, if let's say a very butch-looking woman who never wears skirts is going to work, and their supervisor decides, well, she's not girly enough.
That's exactly.
And we have somebody working at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who thinks that women ought to look a certain way, and be girly enough for, his tastes. Otherwise, you're not eligible to work.
But he doesn't act in a stereotypical male way either in treating her like a woman. But treats her like crap.
But the scenario you laid out was exactly what was happening in Price Waterhouse. You had a woman who was being passed over for promotion, and she had a supervisor say to her, if you dressed more femininely, you would get further ahead. And so she sued because she wasn't fired, but she was not being promoted. And the reason she wasn't being promoted was, in fact, because she did not fit the stereotype. She wasn't wearing the dresses and the makeup and all of that. And she was specifically told, girl it up and you can get your promotions. So that's where that case, and that was the U.S. Supreme Court too. So that's where that line of reasoning comes from.
But it didn't clearly say in that decision sexual orientation and gender identity are included under Title VII. That stretch sort of started happening as additional courts began to look at, and the seminal case is Macy versus ATF, in which an individual applied for a job with the ATF, initially hired, but then came back and said, oh yeah, by the way, I'm transgender. Oh, sorry, we don't have that job for you anymore. Thanks very much. So she sued, and both the EEOC and the federal court that heard the case said, wait a minute, this falls under the language of Price Waterhouse, which says that you cannot punish someone for deviating against sex stereotypes, which is what they were doing.
What David was saying is, did that specifically say sexual orientation and gender identity? Where that came out is in guidance that they would issue. Like there was a Dear Colleague letter that was written in 2016 from the Department of Education and the Department of Justice, and it was sent out to school districts across the country that specifically said their interpretation of sex included sexual orientation and gender identity, specifically to protect those classes of people. And that was the guidance that was sent out to schools, which was rescinded in January of 2017 by the Trump administration. One of the first things they did.
Do you know what I love about this? We're arguing, does it include this, doesn't it? People are actually out there and spending lots of money to do this.
Your money.
To figure out ways to discriminate.
Sure.
The court should say, well, it's discrimination.
I can't
It's
think
wrong.
of really very many rulings or executive orders or laws. Of course, they haven't been able to get much through the legislature or through Congress, but virtually everything that they have done has taken something away from someone. It just seems there's this undercurrent of meanness, the likes of which I have never seen before in at least a political entity in the United States. I've seen it in Europe and the Soviet Union and whatnot, but it seems like everything they come out with has this undercurrent of meanness.
And this is why it is so crucial, especially for people in the LGBT community, to register and get out to vote.
99 days.
Because Ted Cruz is going to support whatever buffoon Trump puts up, and whatever buffoon that is going to want to take things away from people, including employment protections for students. And so we need Beto O'Rourke. We need there are a whole slew of Democratic candidates that need our support, whether you can give them money, whether you can help work their campaigns. Please get involved.
Get involved in whichever candidate you support,
Yeah.
and is going
Unless
to
it's
do good for
Republican
you.
candidates,
Well,
they just stay
you know,
home. Just stay home.
there are some good ones out there, which is what's a shame. We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. Our guests are Leslie McMurray and Katie Sprinkle, who will be the McMurray Sprinkles, or the Sprinkle McMurrays.
McSprinkles.
The McSprinkles in just 7 weeks. We'll be back with more right after this.
I'm Jelinsky Brown with Research Center United Black Element, and I listen to Lambda Weekly radio program on 89.3 K9, the voice of the people. I am the people, so hear me speak.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. Our guests today are Leslie McMurray and Katie Sprinkle. Leslie also works at the Resource Center, which does lots of good stuff for the LGBT community and others, the HIV community and other people. I mean,
We spread goodness and light.
Can I ask you a work-related question? Sure. You just handed this awesome new card. You have a new position. What are you going to be doing?
I'm helping with Raphael doing education and advocacy on transgender issues. They feel rightfully that and especially since we're so much in the crosshairs right now, that if we're out talking about issues relating to transgender people, it's probably best to have that lived experience told by someone who lives that life.
Awesome. That is just.
So it's good.
I'm so happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's something I'm really enjoying. I am getting out and spreading my wings a little bit and trying to make a difference.
Wow. That changes the whole rhyming thing, though. But it's trans for pay.
Yeah.
Before the break, we were talking a little bit about Trump. And, one thing that occurred to me this week, I think it was Rudy Giuliani. After the Michael Cohen tape came out, Rudy Giuliani said, "Your favorite president has done nothing wrong." And he's right, because Obama has done nothing wrong.
Yeah. It's nice of him to defend him like that.
I thought
really
so.
Needs defending, but
what this tape reveals is that Trump did know about the Trump Tower meeting on Russia ahead of time. It revealed that in order to make that second payment to one of his hookers, they had to create a corporation to pay her off, which could be all sorts of illegal. But what I really learned about Trump this week is that paying $250,000 to have sex twice makes him not the best deal maker in the world.
no.
Well, it might have been the best deal.
Hookers, they were fantastic. They do a tremendous job in their chosen lines of work.
But, I was thinking more like, He's just lucky it didn't cost him more. That's the way I see it.
Well,
maybe he brokered the best deal he possibly could.
I think he did, but that's...
Stormy may have ended up, because there are probably going to be a lot of call girls out there that are going to be very upset with Stormy, because they were like, hey, we could have gone back and turned this into a gravy train that lasted 4 to 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, game's up.
Yeah, they're going to blame her for their gravy train.
Yeah.
But it's just, the cynical side of me says that all of this is just a great big giant distraction, that he's happy that they're focused on hookers because he's out undermining democracy in the very core of the United States of America, and we're all going, yeah, but hookers. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that whole Benghazi nonsense of here's the big distraction over here, but watch the other hand, folks. It's kind of like the magician, and that's what he strikes me as.
Sure. I mean, the goal here, and we have to keep focused on what it is to destroy Social Security, Medicare, and national health care, which includes not just Obamacare, but the CHIP program and all sorts of...
And every legacy of the Obama presidency also that want to kind of try and destroy.
It goes back to, that's why people have got to be involved. You've got to get out there and work for whatever candidate it is, because, what they're allowing, or what Trump is allowing and actively pursuing, is to give trillions of dollars to corporations, and hoping that you don't notice. And I'm still shocked and amazed at the number of trumpeters who still are like...
Here's what I thought was interesting this week with these new tariffs that are coming on. One of the groups that's being heard are the soybean farmers, because China put a huge tariff on...
$12 billion. How are they getting hurt?
Well, and that's the thing, because all of a sudden Republicans are not interested in deficits, and I'm not getting that.
Yeah, they were fine with it when it's, giving the $1 trillion to corporations. Now, the other thing that happened, and I think that was last week, is the Fed is now intimating that they're going to have to start increasing interest rates, which is what the Republicans don't want to have happen, because one of the excuses they use for running the deficit up with this $1 trillion tax deal was that, well, right now it doesn't cost very much to have a lot of debt. But if interest rates start creeping back up, it's going to start costing a lot more.
Dwight Eisenhower was a Republican. I'm just kind of wondering if you'd have been able to show him unequivocal evidence that Russia interfered in his election, we'd be landing Higgins boats at St. Petersburg.
Oh, big time.
But there's been nothing about Russia from the federal government to say this is wrong, this is unacceptable, we are putting some sort of penalty. I mean,
and you're saying Eisenhower. Let's get more recent. Do you think Reagan or George Bush, either one, would have put up with?
I think 43 would have been upset.
Well, I'm saying either George Bush.
Any of them.
I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anyone.
I mean, not just being upset, I mean being appalled and outraged to the point where they would do something about it, or it would dominate the news cycle.
Consider it an act of war.
Well, here's something that the Trump administration is doing. They're trying to ban transgender people from the military because, talk about where that military trans ban stands right now, because it's been going on a year. We just passed the anniversary of when they rescinded orders to allow trans people to serve in the military because I think, in the words of whoever wrote that report, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect anything.
Yeah, they've been serving for a long time, and they've been serving loyally and honorably. But they've been having to do so in the closet, much like gay or lesbian troops had for the longest time.
So what's the latest thing that came out this week?
Ash Carter did a report under the Obama administration and said that transgender service in the military would not affect unit cohesion or readiness or anything else, and that they were all for it. The military continues to be in favor of it. It's the Trump administration that's against it. They're arguing, or one of their arguments is cost. Saying that we don't want to pay, that's one of the latest things, is we don't want to pay for transition-related expenses for transgender troops, even if they're in the military or veterans.
But isn't part of what they were going to accept were trans people who have completed their transition?
That was one of those things. Yeah, that was basically saying we're not going to allow you to serve, essentially. Some have had gender reassignment surgery. They would allow those in, but it's still terribly discriminatory and unacceptable to us.
Well,
and the same with hormone therapy. And
Yeah,
stuff.
but with the cost of it, the cost ranges or estimates were from about $2.7 million a year to $7.5 million a year. And this is on a military budget of just shy of $700 billion. So the percentage is so negligible. To put it into some perspective, the military spends $80 million a year, or 10 times the high figure for transgender troops. They spend $80 million a year on ED medication.
Yeah, but you know what? That's not just Viagra, it's also Cialis.
Yeah, that's making
well, the other thing is
nothing like a nice crisp salute.
The other thing here is, remember, Trump spends $125,000 to have sex with a call girl too. So
250,000, and it was 2.
Yeah, I think the
Right,
annual
125
budget
each.
for call girls would exceed that. Other arguments,
and the second one was multiple times.
That if they have transgender surgery, that they're
discount.
going to eliminate or minimize suicide from veterans, because the military is well aware that suicide is a problem among veterans.
Something like 22 people
a day.
Yeah. Commit
So
suicide.
it is definitely a problem, but the issue of surgery for transgender people is kind of a red herring there, because for someone who is a veteran of the military and is also transgender, all those things that would affect a veteran committing suicide, things like maybe a lack of mobility or use of limbs because of a battlefield injury, drug and alcohol abuse, family issues, society issues, PTSD, all those various factors that might lead somebody to take their own life aren't corrected by gender reassignment surgery. So they're unaffected. So I don't think you can draw a connection between those. But they're taking public comment now, and that's what we would urge people to do, is to go and comment on that issue, because it really is a non-issue. It's purely hatred and discriminatory action.
And in addition, federal courts still aren't allowing it, thankfully.
The ban. They're not allowing the ban.
Yeah.
Right.
Again and again and again.
And again, part of what happens in these lawsuits is, the administration will propose some policy, and when the policy has an official start date, which this did, then you can step in and sue to block it. And so what the administration will do is they'll whip out the old chestnuts of, it'll undermine unit cohesion, and then the medical expenses. The problem that the Trump administration is having, luckily, is that the military themselves are saying, look, we've already done it. We've already made the accommodations that need to be made. We can do this.
They've done the studies also.
They've done the studies. It's not causing a problem. We're the military. We can handle it. And so when they go in front of these federal judges and they whip out this stuff, well, then in this particular instance, whether it's the ACLU or Lambda Legal, they simply say, well, Judge, all you got to do is ask the military themselves. They will tell you this is not a problem.
And the studies that have been done to show that especially younger recruits, if you're 18 and you're going into the military, you knew some transgender kids in school. You knew gay people. And working with them is like...
It's a lot like the hullabaloo over the whole bathroom issue, because all the law enforcement agencies who the Republicans claim to respect so much, back the blue, but they never would talk to the law enforcement agencies who said, this is a non-issue. It doesn't happen. This isn't something that we want to be called out for. This is ridiculous. Stop it. They wouldn't listen to them.
And in fact, in Austin in the last session, there were police chiefs from all of the major cities in the state who did a press conference on the steps of the Capitol and said, this is a non-issue. In fact, it would create a really stupid issue and a really stupid waste of resources in all of our major urban areas if we were to implement this bill. It's just insane. And so they don't even listen to their own people. You're right. They're all the first ones just like, back the police, back the police, back the blue.
Military. We're,
And they don't listen to them.
Well, they didn't even invite them to come in and testify.
Well, because they would have testified wrong.
Yeah. So when you go back and you look at who they had come in that they invited, they had no public safety folks. They had no law enforcement people. They had ministers from renowned anti-LGBT churches coming in to talk about a public safety issue
that they knew nothing about.
And they wouldn't even ask them to come in. So to me, the telltale sign on all of this, the Trump administration doesn't want you talking to the military because they know the military is going to say, look, let transgender troops serve. We've already done this. It's not a problem. The state legislature wouldn't let police come in and testify on their dime anyway because, hey, they're not going to testify the way we want them to. So something has to be done to hold government accountable. And because right now, the Republicans are just not being held accountable by their own people.
You know, I saw a study that came out this morning, and it's not related to that, but it's related to what you're saying. One party is not being held accountable. In the study, what it said was that one of the reasons that Republicans are so against climate change has nothing to do with whether or not they believe in it, because a study of Democrats and Republicans showed that both sides believed that climate change was real, that reducing carbon would reduce climate change, and that we should be doing something about it. So going further and trying to figure out what's going on that Republicans are seen as being against climate change. What was his name? Bob Inglis, I think was his name. He was a former South Carolina representative, and he was in office during the Clinton administration, and this was his quote. He said, "All I knew was that Al Gore was for it, and therefore I was against it." So it had no basis in anything. Exactly the same thing is going on today, but with other issues. Well, with this issue, but with other issues that, well, the Democrats are for transgender people, so we're against them. You're trying in your, when you're saying, but all they had were evangelicals, and it's not that evangelicals are all against transgender people, but they're fright leaders, right? Morning News did a story today or yesterday about Jeffress down at First Baptist Church, and boy, did they slam him. But they said, that's really not what goes on at the church. On Sunday when you go, they're talking Bible, but he has this public persona of being an idiot. A monster is closer to what a bigot and a monster is closer to the way they described him. But same thing right here, and same thing with what you're talking about. It's just, rather than solve the issue, therefore so I'm against it.
Well, if you remember the old television show The West Wing, there was a wonderful sequence on the show where they were dramatizing the tobacco fight. And one of the people in the administration was going to, by golly, get the money that they needed to continue the fight because it was the right thing to do, and he accomplishes that goal. The guy who's running the president's campaign comes in and says, "Why did you do that?" He goes, "Because it needed to be done." He goes, "And you just cost us these 3 states." He says, "You didn't want to win the fight. You want to win the election." And that's what's going on. If this is something Obama supported, then I'm going to be against it, because then I get to go back to my district or my state and say, this is an Obama era deal. I'm against it, and people will stand up and applaud.
But this is just such insanity. We've seen this time and again where Trump creates a situation, a crisis, that affects real people, real lives, and then he wants to undo it and do exactly the opposite and come in as the hero who fixed it. Even though he's the one who actually created a problem where there was none. And that happened with the kids at the border, and it's still going on. It happened with soybeans in Iowa, in Minnesota, and Wisconsin, where these farmers are getting hit because of Trump's tariffs. and he says, I'm going to bring $12 billion in to compensate for that. And they're saying, no, that's ridiculous. I want a fair market price for my... and most of those farmers are saying $12 billion wouldn't even begin to cover it.
That's like the
What
old
their losses
advertising
are.
adage of create the need and then fill it.
Yeah. It's, I mean, that's him. He's just creating these situations, and then he wants to be the hero who comes in and saves everybody because he's got this brilliant idea to fix it. You think like the undo button, or don't do it in the first
We
place?
need to take a break.
Trump, I don't think of hero.
We need to take a break. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 Knon FM. I'm Dave Taffet here in the studio with the late Patti Fink. Our guests are the McSprinkles, and one of them is making faces at me right now.
Say which one. Say which one.
It wasn't you. It was that other one. We'll be back with more right after this.
Hey, I'm John Carlo. You're listening to Lambda Weekly on 89.3 KNON FM.
And this is Lambda Weekly. I'm Dave Taffet here with the late Patti Fink and Katie Sprinkle and Leslie McMurray, our transgender terrorists who joined us. I had one little story. I was just reading these odd news stories this morning. So in the Colorado Capitol, you know how in our Capitol, as you walk around the rotunda, it goes from portraits of our first governor to the current governor. Well, they have something similar in Colorado, and those are pictures of the president. To do one of them costs about $10,000, and they raise the money for the portrait as soon as the person goes into office. So for Bush and Obama, it took about 4 months into each one's office to raise the $10,000 for the portrait, and those portraits were displayed as soon as they had them up.
Still waiting?
They have $45 towards Trump. A year and a half into his term.
Maybe they can hang a pencil drawing.
Yeah, well, so here's what somebody who gives a tour of the Capitol noticed. Oops. There's a space where Trump is supposed to go. Somebody had hung a portrait of Putin.
Perfect.
Somebody photoshopped a really good photo. It's a man sitting on a stool with a very large woman sitting on his lap, and they superimpose Putin's face on the man and Trump's face on the woman. And I was like, that's very fitting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Protest, Penny.
There are protests happening every night, and they have been since what I call the Proud Treason, which was July 16th when Trump stood
The Treason Summit.
Yeah, the Treason Summit in Helsinki, when he made that press conference with Putin and just groveled and fawned. And so there have been protests since that day, and they have continued nightly. And we have some Dallasites who are participating in that, who are up there now and have been up there since the beginning.
Isn't Karen McLaughlin up
Karen
there doing
McLaughlin.
that? She's been on our show several times.
Karen McLaughlin and her partner, Marla Custard, have been up there and will continue to be up there. And if you have an opportunity to get to D.C., I know that there are groups that are going to participate in those. They will continue nightly. And what's very creative, I think, is that they're doing different themes every night. They had a mariachi band out one night. They did an opera night. They've had a group of sharks and people in shark costumes, and it's a kind of because it's Shark Week. Shark Week. And just to make it fun, but they're out there every single night, and it will continue. And I think that's an exciting thing, so that when he comes and goes, he hears them. He must hear them, because they're doing Lafayette Park, and they have actually seen him several times come through the front door of the White House as he comes and goes. And so he hears protests, and I think that's really great. There's this old saying, an adage, that comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And they're afflicting the comfortable in D.C. We are. Our citizenry.
Another thing, I'm surprised that there is not more outrage on, because as much as we seem to ballyhoo about the First Amendment, is the freedom of the press. Our president has called the free press the enemy of the people. I mean, if that doesn't sound like, again, Stalin or Hitler or some other horrible strongman dictator, I don't know what does. Because that's one of the, I think, as much as anything in this country, is what makes it great, is the freedom of the speech and the freedom of the press. And to call the press, the free press, the enemy of the people is absolutely abhorrent, and I just wish there was more outrage from the press itself and
Well,
from
I
the
mean-
people defending it, because if it was gone, oh my God.
Here's a good example,
You don't know
though.
what's missing.
Fox News stepped up to defend CNN this week
Yes,
when a
I saw
CNN
that.
reporter was denied access to a presidential event.
Because she was asking the wrong questions. She was asking about the Russia probe and all the things developing out of that.
With their fake news.
And they banned her from the next event, and they all stood together, and so that I was really proud of our free press.
There are
for
several
standing
people
together.
on Fox News who have, throughout the presidency, I mean, what is it, Shepard Smith, numerous times has come out and said, you know, you call us a lot of names and you try to undermine us, but the fact is that we are all journalists and we are all doing our jobs here. So there are several people at Fox News who, you know, don't work on, you know, the
On
morning
Fox and
show
Friends
and
and-
are not Sean Hannity or
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Cowardly.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that, you know, there was a meme going around social media. It was like, yeah, Trump says that the free press is the enemy of the people. You know, not the MS-13, not ISIS, not Al Qaeda, not, you know, meddling Russians. The free press. That's who we got to be worried about.
Well, but that puts us in the same category as Canada, the EU. So I'll stand with Justin Trudeau. I wanted to ask a couple of other transgender newsy things. There's been something going around, especially on Twitter, and if it's on Twitter, it has to be true, that the federal government is denying transgender people the right to change their name on their passports. And I know changing your federal papers in some states is the only way that you can get your state papers changed. It was that way in Texas.
Not as much the name as the gender.
Well,
The gender, right, yeah.
for years it was easier for those of us in Texas to get our federal documents changed than it was to get our state documents changed. And so there has been, and I'll describe it as panic right now, that the story going around was that not only is the State Department denying people new passports with their correct name and gender markers on them, but we're retroactively denying them. So
withdrawing passports from people.
right, and I have not seen any first-hand information about that where that's happened to somebody. It's just been.
So let's say, I don't want this called fake news. Let's just say, as far as we know, that is not true.
It's now. I'm part of the Transgender Legal Network, and of course, this was brought up Thursday.
Is that a secret cell?
Shh. They're loosely tied to the Hurricane Committee. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
And so what they did was they put out some information that says, look, they have not changed their policies. Their policies have not actually changed in several years. They are requiring a doctor's letter if there is some difference between what your gender was noted at your birth and what it is showing up on all your other legal documents. So for years, those of us who needed to get our birth certificates up to date, we have believed that if we just took in the new birth certificate, we would be fine. But apparently the reason that this got started was somebody with a changed birth certificate went in, requested the change, and initially was told, yeah, we can do that, it's not a problem. Part of the verification process is they check a database, I'm guessing Social Security, which will show that you did in fact have some previous information that was now updated, gender markers were corrected, and then based on that, they will then send out a letter saying we need this additional documentation, which is a letter from your doctor. I pulled it up. It's the same letter that the Social Security Administration requires. It does not require the infamous irreversible language, although if you have that letter, you will get the normal 10-year. If you don't have that letter, They have been doing these 2-year passport renewals. But the letter from the doctor is not new. It's been around for a long time. So what I've told my clients when we do their name and gender markers is, after we're done in court, you go to do your passport, take your doctor's letter with you. And that should take care of it. And I've not had any...
Because you have to have your Social Security corrected, you have to have passport corrected, or get a new passport if you didn't have one.
License, your car
so
title,
when you go in and you get
everything.
that stuff corrected, if you're taking the correct documentation in, if you've got the court order, take it with you. If you've got the driver's license, Social Security card done, take it with you. And the doctor's...
And it's interesting, if you have a court order, you would think the court order would cover everything. That the court itself should have checked all those things.
Yeah. Well, and that's where some of the judges who hear these cases get very frustrated with agencies who want to say, well, that's not good enough. Because the way the law is set up, the judge hearing the case is the fact finder. That judge is hearing the evidence to make the determination to issue the court order. So the added documentation that agencies are requiring above and beyond a court order, they're putting themselves in, well, I'm going to be the fact finder here. DPS has tried to do it, Social Security has tried to do it, Health and Human Services has tried to do it, Social Security is doing it. The difference is that within the federal system, a state judge can't really dictate anything to the federal system.
Yeah, but it just seems to me like it's just another obstacle that they're putting up.
It's another obstacle. It's another way
We're used to it.
Making you, say, nope, you've still got to prove who you are to us.
Which is ridiculous. If there is a court order, and if they're not trusting a state court order about something like this, for an individual, for something that's very personal.
To me, I would flip it around and say this should be part of the Patriot Act, because to provide for national security, we need to know who you are, and you need to look like your identification. And if you don't, that can be a national security issue. So it should be covered under the Patriot Act that transgender people are mandated to have correct identification.
But remember, this is the same people who want to undo the citizenship of naturalized citizens in this country.
Right.
They want to, you finally become you're an immigrant, you become a citizen, kind of like Melania Trump. You become a citizen, and now they want to go back years later and undo this on selected people. I think that's outrageous, and I think it's George Orwellian.
Well,
Matt.
In this particular case, though, I think there's one other thing. It's if there was straight rules about it, that you get your court order, that's what changes your Social Security, your car, the whole list of things. This is what changes it, because we trust the judges that we've elected and appointed in this country to have done the right thing, done the right research, get all the facts, and then issue a correct ruling. This isn't a matter of, but if we did that and said this is what you need, what we're doing is we're legitimizing transgender people.
Or obeying court orders. I mean, it should be contempt of court if they don't. Because there's even school districts that'll say we're not going to issue a school transcript in the kid's correct name, even after receiving a court order.
Well, and there's an added feature to all this that for years, and it goes back to the old Harry Benjamin standards, which to even use his name, even though he was a pioneer, he's somewhat of a pariah now, because the way the transgender community sees him now, there was that whole gatekeeper mentality, which he didn't himself like, but that was sort of thrust upon him by the medical establishment, where when they first started providing treatment to transgender people, it was a doctor looking at you and say, okay, you need to prove to me who you are. And then once I'm convinced, then we can move forward. And there were a number of assumptions that took place. The first being that transition ended with surgery, which of course we now know that's not the case. There are plenty of people who opt to have surgery, plenty who opt not to have surgery.
Or can't afford it.
And that transition really never ends. It's because life is a transition. And so that holdover still exists. There are still people who think that they know what it takes to be transgender and that surgery. And that hasn't been the standard. I mean, WPATH did away with that years ago.
WPATH is the
World Professional Association for Transgender Health. They took over the reins for prescribing the medical standards of care. It used to be called the Harry Benjamin Society. And because of the whole gatekeeper mentality, they thought, you know what, let's change the name, get a fresh start, and reevaluate. Because the old Harry Benjamin standards were very draconian. I mean, you could not deviate from them for any reason. Now, they're not that way. Counselors are free to say, okay, you know what, you're living full-time, even though at work, you're not presenting at work because you have to continue to work. So for that, under the old Harry Benjamin standards,
Start over.
you wouldn't get credit for that. Well, now you do. Now, obviously, at some point, you do have to come out at work, but it's not as draconian as it once was. So, but the bottom line is, all these people, when you look back at the old Renee Richards and Jan Morris days, that's where people got their first education of transgender people, and the belief was, oh, well, have you had surgery yet? That's why that's such a
Buzzword.
a question that we're trying to teach people not to ask, because that's not the period at the end of the sentence.
and we have like 1 minute.
You know what's really crazy about that is people have you had the surgery yet? Well, it's really a lot of surgeries too. So even in the concept, but I find that the WPATH standards are so flexible because we are dealing with human beings.
Right.
One person may have complications in a given situation, another may not. Another may require these surgeries, another may not. And so I think that's a great letting go of the draconian past for a flexible, real-world future.
My favorite question was always when somebody would go, hey, is the surgery painful? And I was like, yeah, it's the most painful cut in salary I've ever experienced.
And I want to thank Katie Sprinkle, who's an attorney. If you need to get in touch with a specialist in the law for transgender, she certainly is one.
She's in the book.
Leslie McMurray, who is the new transgender advocate at Resource Center. Thank you both for filling in at the last minute, and it's always a pleasure to have you here. For all of us here at Lambda Weekly, Candy Markham is our guest next week, and we'll see you then.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.